Quick question. Without checking your phone, do you actually know what time it is right now? Be honest. You just checked your phone in your head, didn't you? That's fine. That's exactly the point. For the vast majority of human history, the thing you just reached for didn't exist. No phone, no clock, no watch, no app gently buzzing to remind you of anything. So how did people actually function? How did anyone know when to wake up, when to eat, when to show up anywhere? The first clock anyone ever used was already hanging in the sky, completely free of charge. The sun crossing the sky was humanity's original timepiece. Sunrise meant wake up and get moving. Sunset meant stop and rest. And the sun reaching its highest point overhead marked the middle of the day. Here's a genuinely strange twist, though. The word noon didn't originally mean midday at all. It comes from the Latin nona hora, the ninth hour, counted from sunrise, which landed at roughly 3 in the afternoon. For centuries, noon meant mid-afternoon, not midday. The meaning only drifted backward to 12 o'clock because monks kept nudging their prayer time earlier. Partly because that prayer marked the end of their daily fast, which gave everyone a pretty strong incentive to not wait until 3 p.m. to eat. So in a roundabout way, hungry monks are the reason noon means what it means today. Ancient Egyptians took this a step further around 3500 BC, building giant stone obelisks specifically to cast long, readable shadows. As the sun moved, the shadow swept around like a giant hand on a giant clock, except the clock was an entire monument. By around 1500 BC, the design got more refined, smaller, more portable sundials with markings precise enough to track individual hours rather than just rough chunks of the day. Great system. One small issue. It only works when the sun is actually out. No sun, no clock. Cloudy day, no clock. Indoors, no clock. Humanity needed a backup plan for basically half of every single day. The backup plan, it turns out, was dripping water. Water clocks, technically called clepsydras, may go back as far as 4000 BC in China, and were also used heavily in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The idea was simple. Water drips at a roughly steady rate from one container into another, and the rising or falling water level marks the passing hours. Some were genuinely sophisticated, multi-tiered systems with floats, dials, even moving figures that marked the hour automatically. For centuries, this was considered the most accurate timekeeping technology humans had. Worked day or night, rain or shine, genuinely solid upgrade. But the real problem wasn't measuring the hours. It was knowing the hours while you were trying to sleep. Medieval monks had an extremely strict problem. Certain prayers had to happen at specific hours throughout the night, every single night, whether anyone felt like waking up or not. Their solution was the candle clock, a candle marked with evenly spaced lines that burned down at a roughly predictable rate. Watch which line the flame had reached, and you'd know roughly how much of the night had passed. Then someone had a genuinely brilliant idea. Push a metal pin or small ball into the wax at each marked interval. As the candle burned down to each pin, the metal would drop, hit a tray underneath, and make a sharp clang in the silence of the night. The world's first alarm clock, built entirely out of wax and gravity. Imagine being a 9th century monk and getting violently startled awake by a piece of falling metal at 3 a.m. every single night for your entire life. One inventor took this idea much further. In the year 1206, a brilliant engineer named Al-Jazari built a candle clock so advanced it included a dial to actually display the time, plus a small mechanical fastening piece to hold the candle steady. A tiny design detail called a bayonet fitting. That exact fastening mechanism is still used in equipment today, 800 years later. A monk trying not to oversleep accidentally helped invent a piece of hardware you've probably used without ever knowing its name. China and Japan took a completely different approach to the exact same problem. Instead of watching the clock, they started smelling it. Incense clocks burned slowly along a carefully shaped spiral or maze-like path, with different sections sometimes made from entirely different scented materials, which meant a person could tell roughly what time it was just by which smell happened to be drifting through the room. No glancing, no checking, just breathing. Incense clocks weren't just for temples either. They were used in geisha houses to time appointments, on ships to track watches, in palace coronations, and even by households to remind themselves when it was time to take medicine. An entire household's daily rhythm, gently organized by scent. There's one more method that sounds almost too whimsical to be real, but genuinely existed. The flower clock. Certain flowers reliably open and close at specific, predictable times of day. Plant the right combination in a circular bed, in the right order, and in theory, you could glance at which flowers were open and roughly estimate the hour, entirely from a garden. Whether anyone seriously relied on a flower garden as their actual daily schedule is a fair thing to question. But the fact that humans tried it tells you everything about how badly we've always wanted a readable clock, in literally any form available. There was one environment, though, where almost none of these methods actually worked. The open ocean. Water clocks slosh around uselessly on a moving ship. Sundials need a sun that cooperates and a horizon that isn't constantly tilting. Sailors needed something that simply didn't care how much the boat rocked. Enter the hourglass. Sand, unlike water, barely cares about waves. Hung from a hook, it kept ticking through a storm exactly the same as it did on a calm afternoon. Sailors used hourglasses to mark 30-minute stretches called watches, and every single time the sand ran out, a crew member would physically ring a bell by hand to announce the new half hour to the entire ship. Which means, for centuries, the only reason anyone on a ship knew what time it was because someone was personally responsible for flipping glass bulbs and ringing a bell, all day and night, for the entire voyage. Sailors even used the hourglass to measure speed, tossing a knotted rope tied to a floating piece of wood off the back of the ship, then counting how many knots passed through their hands before the sand ran out. That's genuinely where the word knots, as a unit of speed, comes from. Eventually, around the year 1300, the mechanical clock arrived. Gears, weights, and a regulating mechanism called a verge and foliot, which controlled a falling weight at a steady, repeatable pace. For the first time in human history, time stopped depending on the sun, water, fire, or flowers. It became something abstract, numbers on a dial, completely detached from the natural world. Church towers and town halls rushed to install them, and the sound of bells marking the hour became the new shared heartbeat of entire towns. But mechanical clocks created a brand new problem nobody had ever needed to solve before: getting people to actually wake up on time, on command, every single day, for a job. So an entire profession appeared out of nowhere: the knocker-upper. Their literal job was to walk the streets before dawn and tap on people's bedroom windows with a long pole until they woke up, for a small weekly fee. For decades, in parts of Britain especially, this was a completely normal job. A real human alarm clock, going door to door, before mechanical alarm clocks were affordable enough for most working households to own. Which honestly explains a lot about how strict factory time discipline must have felt. Workers who'd spent their whole lives waking up with the sun were suddenly expected to be in a specific seat, at a specific minute, every single day, whether their body agreed with that plan or not. Entire generations had to learn an instinct humans had simply never needed before: caring deeply about a number on a dial. Which brings us back to that wrist you instinctively checked at the start of this video. Every single one of those ancient systems, the sun, the water, the candles, the incense, even the flowers, was solving the exact same problem your phone solves in half a second without you ever thinking about it. So next time your phone battery dies, and you have absolutely no idea what time it is, you could always just look up.